In 1974, on a tropical island in the Philippines, a man stepped out of the jungle carrying a rifle, a sword, and orders from a war that had ended almost 29 years earlier. His name was Hiroo Onoda. He was 52 years old, his uniform belonged to another era, and he still believed his mission was active. To understand how this happened, the story must return to 1944. At 22, Onoda received intelligence and guerrilla warfare training designed for soldiers operating behind enemy lines. He was taught to survive, observe, sabotage, gather information, and continue resisting even after conventional forces had collapsed around him. In December 1944, he was sent to Lubang, a small Philippine island southwest of Manila. Allied forces were advancing, and Japan's position was deteriorating rapidly. Onoda arrived not to win a conventional battle, but to deny the enemy easy control of the island's airfield, harbor, roads, and supplies. His assignment centered on sabotage and long-term resistance. Onoda later said he had been ordered not to surrender and not to take his own life. However long it took, he believed he was expected to remain in the field, preserve his unit, and wait until superior officers returned with new instructions. In February 1945, American and Filipino forces landed on Lubang. The island's organized Japanese defense collapsed quickly under the attack. Rather than surrender, Onoda withdrew into the mountains and dense forest, carrying the logic of his final orders away from the battlefield and into a conflict with no clear ending. 3 soldiers went with him: Yuichi Aketsu, Shoichi Shimada, and Kinshichi Kozuka. Together, the 4 men built hidden camps, watched roads and military facilities, and treated the island as occupied territory. What had been part of a defeated army became a small, isolated guerrilla group living beyond normal command. Outside the jungle, the war ended. Japan announced its surrender in August 1945, and the formal documents were signed on September 2nd. Across Asia, armies disarmed, prisoners returned home, and occupations began. But on Lubang, 4 armed men continued living inside the assumptions, fears, and orders of wartime. Leaflets were dropped over the forest, announcing Japan's defeat. Later came newspapers, family photographs, personal letters, and messages broadcast by loudspeaker. Onoda was not cut off from every sign that the war was over. Evidence reached him repeatedly, in different forms from both Japanese and Philippine sources. The group examined those messages instead of simply ignoring them. But every unusual phrase, printing error, or suspicious detail became evidence of deception. They concluded the documents had been created by the enemy to lure them into the open. Information arrived, but trust did not, and suspicion became part of their survival system. The 4 men learned to survive through tropical rain, illness, hunger, and constant movement. They repaired uniforms, maintained their weapons, built temporary shelters, and studied the island's routines. Yet their survival was never separate from the people living around them, because much of what they needed came from local communities. They took rice, fruit, livestock, and other supplies from farms. Cattle could provide dried meat for months, while stolen food reduced the need to expose themselves for long. To Onoda's group, these were wartime requisitions taken from enemy territory. To the farmers, they were armed raids carried out years after peace. The men also continued acts of sabotage. Crops and stored rice were burned, and property was damaged to obstruct people they regarded as enemy collaborators. These were not harmless acts of endurance or isolation. They extended the violence of the Imperial War into the daily lives of civilians who had already survived it. For families on Lubang, danger could appear without warning, from a tree line, a field, or a path used every day. People closed their doors, avoided certain areas, and learned to watch the surrounding forest. The war was over on maps and in government statements, but fear remained present on the island. Shootouts occurred with police, soldiers, and local residents. Filipino accounts blamed Onoda and his companions for the deaths of as many as 30 islanders, although the exact total remains disputed. Whatever the final number, the consequences were real. Lost relatives, damaged farms, burned harvests, and decades of unresolved anger. Japanese search teams returned with relatives, photographs, recorded appeals, and messages placed where the men might find them. Yet each attempt failed. The stronger the evidence became, the more completely Onoda fitted it into his belief that the enemy was staging an elaborate trap designed specifically for his group. The group eventually began to break apart. In 1949, Akatsu left the others and survived alone for months. In 1950, he surrendered to Philippine authorities. His appearance confirmed that Onoda and the remaining men might still be alive, triggering fresh searches and new attempts to convince them that Japan had surrendered. But Akatsu's surrender did not persuade Onoda. Instead, he suspected that his former companion might now be cooperating with the enemy. The evidence that should have ended the mission became another reason for doubt. The jungle was no longer only a hiding place. It had become a closed system in which every contradiction proved the threat. In May 1954, Shoichi Shimada was killed during an encounter with a search party. Onoda and Kozuka escaped into the forest. The original group of 4 was now reduced to 2, but the death did not end their campaign. It deepened their isolation and reinforced the conviction that the island remained hostile territory. For the next 18 years, Onoda and Kozuka continued together. Governments changed, roads improved, radios carried new voices, and the post-war world moved forward beyond the island. The 2 men observed fragments of that change from hiding, yet continued interpreting everything through a mission and chain of command created in 1944. In October 1972, Onoda and Kozuka attempted to burn harvested rice and exchanged fire with local police. Kozuka was killed. Onoda escaped into the forest alone. At 50 years old, he had lost his final companion and every remaining member of his original group, but still did not consider himself released from duty. News of Kozuka's death revived public interest in Japan. Among those drawn to the mystery was Norio Suzuki, a young traveler with no military authority and no official search team. In February 1974, Suzuki came to Lubang, determined to find the man whom governments, relatives, police, and soldiers had repeatedly failed to reach. Suzuki entered the jungle with limited equipment and searched for signs of a hidden camp. He approached the task differently from the authorities, not as a military operation, but as a personal encounter. Within days, he found Onoda, an achievement that years of organized searches had been unable to produce. The meeting brought 2 versions of Japan face to face. Suzuki belonged to a post-war generation shaped by peace and rapid change. Onoda still wore the damaged uniform of the Imperial Army. Armed and cautious, Onoda listened as Suzuki explained that Japan had surrendered and the world he remembered had disappeared. Onoda did not attack Suzuki, but he would not abandon his mission. He said he required a direct order from a superior officer before he could stop. Suzuki photographed them together and returned to Japan with proof that Onoda was alive, and with the precise condition that might finally end the standoff. Japanese officials located Yoshimi Taniguchi, Onoda's former commanding officer, and brought him to Lubang. On March 9, 1974, Taniguchi read orders ending Onoda's military activities and relieving him of duty. The authority Onoda had waited for across nearly 3 decades had finally arrived in person. Onoda accepted the order. He emerged with his rifle, ammunition, sword, and other equipment maintained across decades in the jungle. His private war ended not because the evidence had suddenly changed, but because authority had finally spoken in the exact military form he had been trained and conditioned to obey. On March 11th, Onoda formally presented his sword to Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos. Marcos granted him a pardon for actions committed on Lubang. A pardon, however, was not a declaration that no harm had been done, and the public ceremony could not erase the deaths, fear, and losses remembered by island families. The next day, Onoda returned to Japan and received enormous public attention. Some saw discipline, loyalty, and endurance. Others saw the legacy of militarism, denial, and unquestioned obedience. He was not the final Japanese holdout. Teruo Nakamura emerged later in 1974. On Lubang, the memory was different. Raids, fear, fires, and deaths. The World War ended in 1945. One order kept it alive there until 1974. And remember, the truth doesn't have to sound believable. This is Sounds Fake, but True.